Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really focusing on equipping you with, well, what I'd call two fundamental superpowers for modern product management.
Exactly. We're going deep on a couple of core capabilities that honestly separate the high-performing product orgs from the ones that are just stuck in those old feature factory cycles.
And this deep dive is all about reframing two concepts that I think are often seen as chores, right? Estimation and slicing.
Yeah, they're treated like administrative burdens, but we're going to show why they aren't just chores. They are, in fact, incredibly sophisticated strategic tools, and their whole purpose is organizational risk reduction.
So our mission today is to get past the buzzwords. We want to cut through all the noise, especially the confusion around acronyms like MVP, MLP, MMP. It's a mess out there.
It really is. The goal is to give you a clear, actionable mental model, one that's rooted in that insight-driven approach you see from leaders like Marty Kagan and the Silicon Valley Product Group, or SVPG.
This isn't just about vocabulary, it's about governance. It's about how you run the business of product.
We're looking at the source material to really understand that necessary shift. How do you stop being a team that just delivers on a schedule and start being a team that delivers measurable, meaningful outcomes based on, continuous validated learning?
Okay, so let's lay it out. First, we're going to tackle the whole estimation problem. We'll show why chasing precision is basically a lost cause and how to shift its purpose to managing uncertainty.
Then we'll get into the fun part, the PM superpower of slicing. That's the actual tangible mechanism for cutting down development risk, market risk, all of it.
And finally, we will put all those product definitions in their place. We'll map them precisely onto the stages of risk they're actually designed to solve.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do it. Let's start with estimation, because I feel like this is where all the tension lives. It's the battleground between product engineering and, well, everyone else.
It absolutely is. In traditional project management, the estimate was a weapon, right?
A stick to beat the team with.
Exactly. But in modern product management, the purpose completely shifts. It is primarily a tool for risk reduction. That's it.
And that distinction is, well, it's everything.
It's non-negotiable. If you take one thing away from this whole section, it should be this. The purpose of estimation is not accuracy. It is insight.
Okay, but let's be real. The reality is that stakeholders, especially in sales or finance, they want a number. They demand a fixed date, a committed scope. So how do we actually defend the idea that an estimate is not a promise?
You defend it by talking about the cost of promising something you simply cannot guarantee. An estimate is definitively not a promise. It's not a fixed delivery commitment, and it is absolutely not a guarantee of scope or outcome.
So what happens when a PM lets that happen? When they let the estimate become a contract?
It's a disaster. It becomes a death march commitment, and in that moment, you destroy the organization's ability to pivot. You kill agility, the very thing you're trying to achieve.
And you start incentivizing all the wrong behaviors, I imagine.
All of them. The team either pads the estimate so much they become useless for planning.
Or they do the opposite. They cut corners.
They cut corners on quality, on testing, on security, anything to hit that arbitrary date. You're trading long-term product health for, short-term compliance with a timeline that was probably wrong from day one anyway.
So if estimation isn't a commitment, what is it? What's the valuable thing we're giving to our stakeholders?
It's a tool for decision-making, a really sophisticated one. Think of it as a mechanism for analyzing trade-offs.
Okay, so like option A versus option B.
Precisely. We use estimation to compare option A versus option B to see which one gives us better value for the perceived effort and risk. And maybe most importantly, the whole process of estimation, it forces us to surface all that uncertainty, all that risk.
Can you give me an example of what that insight actually looks like in practice?
Sure. Let's say the dev team comes back with an estimate that is just wildly high for what seems like a small feature.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. That estimate isn't a failure of the team's speed. It is a massive success of the estimation process.
How so?
It means the team has successfully uncovered something huge, a major technical unknown, a deep dependency risk, or maybe a required architectural change that would have otherwise blown up the project 3 months down the road.
Okay, so the conversation that follows that high estimate, the why is this so high conversation, that's the real value.
That's it. The entire point is to get insight into the complexity, the dependencies, all the assumptions hiding under the surface. If an estimate is just a single number, it tells you nothing.
It's useless.
But if it's a range and it comes with a list of assumptions and uncovered technical debt, that suddenly becomes the most valuable planning document you have.
Which means we have to accept that Product work is just inherently uncertain.
To even use estimation for insight, you have to get comfortable with that fact. Product work, by its very nature, resists precise timing. It's not like building a bridge or, I don't know, pouring concrete.
Right, those are known, repeatable engineering feats. We're not just timing how long it takes to do a known task.
Yeah.
We're timing the discovery process itself.
Exactly. The uncertainty comes from four core areas of just unknowns. The first two are all about market fit and user behavior. We start with the unknown users.
Are we even building the right thing?
That's question one. Will they adopt it? Will they use it the way we think they will? If the answer to any of those changes after you launch, the whole investment could be worthless. That's your value risk.
And what about the risks that aren't about the user? The external stuff.
That's the second area. Unknown constraints. These are the things that pop up late and just blindside a team. Think about legal constraints, new regulations like GDPR or CCPA suddenly applying to your data model.
Or even just internal organizational constraints.
Totally, like relying on some legacy system that's owned by another team that moves at a snail's pace.
Yeah, I can picture that.
Huh.
A simple feature estimate just blows up because a PM realizes, oh wait, we need to integrate with a billing system that hasn't been touched in 10 years.
And it requires a full security audit just to look at its API. That's a perfect example. We've seen entire roadmaps get completely stalled because of one unknown constraint related to compliance. A 2-week feature suddenly becomes a 6-month project because it needs a third-party audit that takes 3 months just to schedule.
And if the estimation process doesn't bring that to light early,
The project is doomed from the start.
okay, so that's users and constraints. The last two unknowns are more on the technical side, right? The classic development risks.
Exactly. Number 3 is unknown technical complexity. This isn't just about how hard the code is to write. It's about integration risks, unexpected performance bottlenecks.
Or finding out your cloud provider has some hard, undocumented rate limit that forces you to completely re-architect everything.
Yes, that uncertainty is always highest when you're dealing with new tech or, like we said, those scary legacy systems.
And the final unknown, the one we tend to forget about until launch day.
The unknown market response. Even if the code is perfect, the feature is blazing fast, and users say they like it. Will they actually adopt it at scale?
And will a competitor's response make the whole thing irrelevant in 6 months?
Right. You can estimate your development time down to the hour, but if the market just shrugs when you release it, your estimation of the value was fundamentally wrong.
So trying to force certainty onto these four unknowns, trying to estimate a big feature with a fixed date before you've even done discovery, that creates what the sources call false confidence.
It's a dangerous illusion of control. It's just an exercise in self-deception.
And that false confidence is toxic, isn't it? Because it stops the team from doing the actual work that matters.
It does. It prevents them from doing the necessary, often messy, discovery work up front. If you commit to building a massive epic in 6 months, you've basically promised the answer before you've even asked the question.
So when the inevitable happens 2 months in, and you discover the scope has to triple, you're trapped.
Your only options are bad ones. Delay the launch something broken, or sacrifice quality and rack up technical debt.
And this all points back to that SVPG principle you mentioned earlier.
The further you are from validated learning, the less precise your estimate should be.
That's the core idea of insight-driven planning, then.
It is. If you're talking about an idea you just came up with in a meeting, a big multi-quarter initiative, your estimate has to be a massive range. A t-shirt size of XL, maybe XXL, representing 6 to 12 months.
But as you learn more,
As you execute your vertical slices, as you test with users, as you resolve those technical unknowns, that cone of uncertainty narrows, your estimates for the remaining work naturally become smaller and a whole lot more reliable.
so given all this unavoidable uncertainty, a good PM doesn't run from estimation.
Yeah.
They just change the conversation around it.
They transform it. The PM has to be the organizational interpreter. They translate the engineering team's complexity and uncertainty into a language the business can actually use for strategic planning.
And the first skill for that is framing work in ranges, not single, fixed numbers.
That's the foundation. Instead of saying the payment system will take 8 weeks, the PM says, look, based on what we know right now and our current assumptions, this work is likely to fall somewhere in the 8 to 14-week range.
That range itself communicates the risk.
It forces a discussion about what could push it toward the 14 weekend. It's a psychological buffer and a planning tool all in one. Marketing can plan for week 8, but have a backup plan for week 14.
And what about the actual tools PMs use to create these ranges? Does it matter?
The methodology you choose kind of dictates the precision. In the really early stages, the idea phase, you use super coarse methods. T-shirt sizing, S, M, L, XL, or affinity mapping.
Fast and cheap?
Fast, cheap, and for high-level prioritization only, you're acknowledging a huge margin of error.
Then as you move into actual delivery, you get more granular.
Right. Once you've defined your vertical slices, then you can move to something like story points. Or, if the org really insists on time, 3-point estimation is a good tool.
Can you break that one down?
Sure. 3-point estimation just means you ask the team for 3 numbers. An optimistic time, a most likely time, and a pessimistic time. The PM can then communicate a weighted average, or even better, the full range. Some teams even run a Monte Carlo simulation to show the probability distribution of different delivery dates.
That sounds pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
But no matter the tool, you're saying the PM has to be explicit about the assumptions.
Every single estimate. It has to be anchored to a list of explicit, testable assumptions.
So you'd say something like, this 10-week estimate assumes we can reuse the existing user profile API.
And that there are no major regulatory changes, and that we don't lose our lead engineer.
Exactly. Because if one of those assumptions changes, if the engineer leaves or the API is deprecated, the original estimate is immediately void. It protects the team.
It turns the estimate from a static number into a living document, a risk management tool. Which means PMs have to be updating these estimates continuously as they learn. Every time you finish a discovery phase, every time you resolve a technical risk by shipping a slice, you revisit the estimate for the rest of the work.
And that's what builds credibility. Stakeholders see that you're transparently managing risk, not just blowing past dates.
And that all feeds into the real strategic benefit. You start using estimation to guide prioritization, not just to feed some arbitrary deadline.
Right, so if 2 features have the same expected business value.
But the estimate for feature A is 1 to 3 weeks, and for feature B, it's 8 to 15 weeks. The choice is obvious.
You do feature A.
Of course. It's lower risk, you get faster learning, and you deliver value sooner. Estimation becomes a strategic lever for maximizing your return on effort.
This feels like a perfect transition into slicing.
Right.
Because if estimation is how we analyze and communicate risk, then slicing is the skill we use to actually make that risk manageable.
It's the PM superpower. Without good slicing, estimation is basically pointless. If you ask a team to estimate a giant 6-month epic, you're going to get a huge range and very low confidence.
What if you break it down?
If you break that epic into 10 tiny 2-week, well-defined slices, the estimate for each one becomes incredibly reliable. And you get valuable feedback every 2 weeks instead of waiting 6 months.
So let's be super clear. Slicing is not just breaking down tasks for a project manager.
Not at all. Let's define it. Slicing means breaking a product idea into the smallest increments that still deliver value or learning.
Value or learning, that's the key part.
The emphasis is on that. A quality slice isn't just small. It has to move the needle. It either delivers something useful to a user, or it confirms or denies a critical hypothesis you have.
And you're saying a high-quality slice has to meet certain criteria.
4 critical criteria, yes. First, it has to be testable with real users. If you can't put the slice in front of actual people and get behavioral feedback, not just QA testing, it fails. You need that live, messy user interaction.
Testability is the proof.
Second, the slice must explicitly reduce risk. We slice to attack our biggest unknowns. If your slice just confirms some minor detail but leaves the riskiest technical or market assumption on the table, it was a bad slice. It has to answer a high-stakes question.
What about the engineering side of it? Feasibility.
Third, it has to be buildable independently. This is so important for team flow. The slice should have minimal dependencies on other big, unreleased chunks of work. It needs to be self-contained enough that you can release it, test it, and even roll it back without bringing the whole system down.
And the last one brings us back to that learning outcome.
Fourth, it must answer a specific question. Before a line of code is written, the PM needs to be able to say, we are building this slice to test if users can successfully complete X when Y is present. If you can't state that specific question, your slice is probably too big or too vague.
This brings up the idea of vertical versus horizontal slicing. This feels like a major mindset shift.
It's maybe the essential mindset shift for product delivery. When I see teams struggling with flow and delivery, 9 times out of 10, they've fallen into the horizontal slicing trap.
And the difference is all about delivering components versus delivering actual value to the customer.
That's it. Horizontal slicing is the anti-pattern. That's when you break work down by technical layer. The front-end team builds the UI, the back-end team builds the APIs, the data team sets up the analytics.
And the result of that is just waiting.
It creates this massive integration tax and dependency debt. The user gets zero value until all those layers are finally stacked together, which could be weeks or months later. The team might be 70% done with the work, but they are 0% done with delivering value or learning.
And then when you finally do integrate and you find a critical flaw,
The cost to fix it is enormous. Multiple teams have already moved on to other things, so you have all this context switching to get them back on the problem. It's a nightmare.
it also stars the feedback loop. You only get feedback every 3 months instead of every week.
Exactly. Horizontal slicing delivers components, but no measurable user value, no learning. It's a project manager's mindset, not a product manager's. It's focused on keeping people busy, not on delivering outcomes. It pushes the riskiest part integration to the very end.
So the strong practice, the PM default, has to be vertical slicing.
Yes. Vertical slicing forces the team to deal with integration complexity early and often, which is just inherently safer. It focuses on a complete end-to-end outcome that cuts through all the layers, front-end, back-end, database, even the deployment pipeline.
It delivers one complete user flow.
Or one job to be done, one meaningful outcome. So instead of a goal like finish the notification settings API, the vertical slice goal is a user can turn off email notifications and that change is saved and we can prove it works.
That's a huge difference. That slice requires tiny bits of work across the whole stack, a little UI, a little API, a little database. But what you get is a complete, testable, demonstrable outcome.
And you can immediately validate the flow, the value, and the technical feasibility of the whole thing.
So the PM's job is really to get the team to see the product not as horizontal layers of tech, but as a vertical shaft of value that you're constantly pushing to the user.
If you can make that shift, you avoid integration hell forever.
Okay, this is the perfect time to clear up the confusion that I swear happens in every product meeting. The minimum X product acronyms.
Yeah, alphabet soup.
Yeah. We need to define them not just by their size, but by the specific type of risk they're supposed to be solving. Because they really are different stages of a product's life.
And they're a progression. That's the key thing to remember. You don't just jump straight to an MMP unless you are absolutely 100% sure of the market demand.
Let's start with the big one, the most abused term in tech, MVP, minimum viable product.
It's so often used as an excuse to just ship something bad, but its true purpose is purely scientific.
It's an experiment.
It is, first and foremost, an experiment. Its sole purpose is learning. That's it. It has nothing to do with a market launch or making money. Its primary goal is to validate assumptions.
Specifically, value, usability, or feasibility assumptions.
Right. Does the user even care? Can they figure out how to use it? Can we actually build this thing? And the PM has to know the exact hypothesis they're testing before the MVP is even defined.
So its characteristics have to reflect that, minimal in scope.
Just enough to test that one riskiest assumption and not one bit more. And crucially, it has to be viable for learning, not viable for delight or scale. You are prioritizing speed and insight over polish, security, or any kind of operational support.
Okay, let's get specific here because a lot of people hear MVP and they just think version 1 of the software. Let's talk about the common forms of MVP that don't even involve a full engineering team.
Yes, we need to normalize these low-fidelity tests. The sources point out a few really effective ones that are not code-heavy.
Like the Concierge MVP.
Concierge MVP is brilliant. You offer a service that looks automated, but behind the scenes, your team is manually doing everything. It is maximum learning for minimum engineering effort. You learn the exact workflow you need to build.
And there are fake door tests.
Also great, you put a button for a new feature on your website, you measure how many people click it, but when they click, they just get a coming soon message.
And that validates demand without writing a single line of code for the feature itself.
Exactly. You can also use prototypes tested with users, high-fidelity mockups, clickable Figma designs. You're testing usability assumptions long before a developer even opens their laptop.
I love the idea of a manual workflow behind a simple UI. It gives the illusion of a full product.
It's so powerful. You build just enough of a user interface to make the user feel like they're interacting with a real system. But all the complex stuff, the data processing, the calculations, that's all being done manually by a person in the background. You get to map the whole user journey before you commit millions to building the automated engine.
Which brings us to the most important anti-pattern to avoid. An MVP is not, and should not be, a small version of the final product.
If you treat your MVP as just phase one of a big rollout, you've completely missed the point. You've lost the chance to pivot or kill the idea cheaply.
If your team spends 6 months building an MVP with enterprise-level security and logging,
You're not building an experiment anymore. You've confused it with an MMP. The MVP has to stay laser focused on challenging your core beliefs about whether anyone even wants this thing.
okay, so once you've done that, once the MVP has validated the core value, then we can start thinking about adoption. That's where the MLP comes in.
The minimum lovable product. Exactly. Now that we know we're building the right thing, we shift our focus. How do we get people to adopt it and stick with it?
So we're moving past just function and into the user's emotional response.
Correct. The MLP's purpose is adoption and early traction. Its primary goal is emotional engagement. The question changes from do they need it to do they love it enough to tell their friends about it? That's what creates your early advocates, your word of mouth growth.
So what are the characteristics of an MLP? How is it different?
An MLP has to go way beyond just usable. An MVP can be clunky and slow. An MLP needs to have polish, exceptional design, and a seamless interaction. The engineering focus shifts from make it work to make it delightful.
And it has to do one thing really, really well.
That's the key. Don't build 10 mediocre features. Build the single most important feature so perfectly that your early adopters become obsessed with it.
So, to summarize, the MVP validates the problem, and the MLP validates the quality of your solution to that problem.
Perfectly put. You use an MLP when market differentiation is critical. When the idea is easy to copy and your ed has to come from user experience, you use it when trust and emotion matter, like in fintech or health tech.
But only after you validated the core value.
You never, ever try to polish a product nobody wants. That's just optimizing failure.
Okay, so that brings us to the top of the pyramid,
Hmm.
the MMP, the minimum marketable product.
This is the big shift. This is the moment your product stops being a discovery project and starts being a real, operational, revenue-generating business unit that's ready to scale.
This is the real launch, in a commercial sense. It's not about learning anymore. It's about selling.
It is. The MMP's purpose is commercial readiness, and its primary goal is revenue and scale. This is the version you spend your marketing budget on. This is the one you train your sales team to sell. This is the one you guarantee uptime for.
Which means the scope has to be so much bigger than just the user-facing features.
Dramatically bigger. It has to include all the non-functional requirements for running an actual business.
Like what?
Well, first, compliance and regulatory requirements. If you're handling payments, you need full PCI compliance. Personal data. You need rock-solid GDPR or high PA mechanisms. You can ignore that for an MVP, but it's an existential requirement for an MMP.
What else?
Support readiness. Not just a FAQ page. You need L1 and L2 support teams, internal documentation, monitoring systems, so your support team can actually solve problems.
Operational scalability has to be there too.
Absolutely. The architecture can't just handle your pilot users. It needs to be ready to handle 10 times or 100 times that volume without falling over or costing you a fortune. And of course, a robust automated pricing and billing structure.
And all of those things add a ton of time and cost, but they have nothing to do with the core feature the user sees.
Nothing at all. And that's the key insight. The MMP is a go-to-market construct. It is not a discovery tool.
So if you're still not sure people want the core feature,
You have prematurely invested in an MMP. The MMP confirms your organizational viability. The MVP and MLP confirm your customer viability. They have to happen in that order.
that progression makes so much sense. From pure learning to emotional adoption to full commercial viability. Let's just summarize that one more time for a clear mental model.
It's the difference between testing a hypothesis, gaining your first fans, and building a sustainable business.
Okay, so MVP. Primary focus is on learning. The risks it reduces are the big ones: value, usability, and feasibility. You're just proving the idea should even exist.
Then the MLP. Its focus is on emotional adoption. It reduces risks around engagement and trust. You're proving that your execution of the solution is superior and sticky.
And finally, the MMP. Focus on commercial viability. The risks here are all organizational: revenue, scale, and compliance. You're proving you can actually sell it, support it, and make money from it.
And knowing which risk you're trying to mitigate right now, that tells you exactly what kind of scope you should be investing in.
Okay, now let's connect all of that back to our superpower: slicing. Because great slicing has to be risk-driven.
100%. If you are slicing a feature, you're probably doing it wrong. If you are slicing to answer a high-stakes question, you are doing it right.
So if my riskiest assumption is that my new AI model will have a high false positive rate, I shouldn't slice up the work to build the whole dashboard.
No, you should slice the absolute minimum piece of UI that exposes that AI output to a tiny group of users so you can just measure the false positives. That's it.
The PM's job is to constantly run a pre-mortem in their head.
Always, you have to be asking, what is our riskiest assumption? What one thing, if it's proven false, would kill this whole initiative?
What must be true for this to work?
And the most important question of all, what is the cheapest, fastest way to test the thing that would invalidate this idea the quickest?
You're actively trying to fail fast. You're looking for the landmine and walking straight toward it, not trying to go around it.
The goal is to slice to answer one high-stakes question at a time. If your slice needs multiple teams, takes 2 months, and tests 3 different things, it's too big. It's too risky. The learning will be confusing. You haven't isolated the variable.
Slicing is really the art of strategic due diligence.
Yeah.
You're prioritizing learning over just checking off features.
Exactly right.
Let's make this super concrete with that search example from the source material. Let's talk about the financial impact of doing it the smart way versus the wrong way.
Okay, so the big goal is build search functionality for a big content platform. The horizontal slicing approach would be to spend, say, 3 months building all the foundational layers. The API, the search index, the database schema.
And the total investment for that could be, what, $150,000 in 12 weeks of team time?
Easily. And you have 0 user value and 0 learning until the very end of that period.
Now let's contrast that with the smart, risk-driven, vertical slicing approach. We treat the whole idea as a series of hypotheses to test.
Okay, so what's our riskiest assumption about value? It's probably, do our users even know how to search for this stuff? Is their intent specific enough to make a search engine useful?
So that leads us to slice 1.
Slice 1. Can users articulate what they want to search for? We build a simple concierge MVP. It's just a search bar. When a user types something and hits enter, it sends the query to a product analyst in a Slack channel. The analyst manually finds the content and emails it back to the user.
And the cost for that is tiny. Maybe a week of engineering and a couple weeks of an analyst's time.
Right. Now, what if we find that 60% of users are just typing in really vague things like, show me something interesting? What did we just learn?
We learned that the problem isn't a lack of search technology. The problem is that our users don't have the vocabulary for our content library. The most powerful search engine in the world would be useless.
And what did we do? We just invalidated the core value hypothesis. We stopped the project immediately, and we just saved the $150,000 we would have burned on the horizontal approach.
That is the power of slicing for learning. Okay, but let's say slice 1 works. Users articulate, now we tackle the next risk, usability.
Slice 2. Do users prefer filters or free text entry? Before we commit to building a huge, complex filtering engine, we could test 2 simple vertical prototypes side by side, one with a powerful text search, one with a structured filter panel. We measure task completion and satisfaction.
And that's maybe a 2-week slice. Functional, but not polished.
Exactly. And assuming that works, we now know the right UI path. The final risk is the business value, the ROI.
So slice 3.
Slice 3. Does search functionality materially improve our business outcomes? Now we build the real functional version of search for a subset of users, and we compare their retention rate or monetization against a control group that doesn't have it. This is where we finally validate the commercial hypothesis.
The outcome is that the organization invests as little as possible until the riskiest assumptions are proven out. You're not building features, you're building learning increments.
Which brings up a critical question. How do we know when a slice is small enough? This definition is what protects you from the sunk cost fallacy.
It's not just about team size or weeks on a calendar, it's about strategic commitment.
A slice is small enough when 3 things are true. First, and this is the most important one, when you would actually change direction if the result is negative.
Oof, it's a tough one.
It is. If you know deep down that you're going to launch this feature no matter what the test says, your slice was too big, or you committed too early. The willingness to actually pivot or kill the idea is the proof that it was a real experiment.
If the team isn't prepared to stop, they're not slicing for risk reduction. They're just tracking execution.
Second, the slice has to be something you can test with real users. If the only way to validate it is with an internal system test, it's not a slice of value, it's just a technical component, and you haven't tested your market risk at all.
And third,
It has to avoid irreversible decisions. You should be able to throw away the code from the learning slice, the UI, the API, whatever, without having to rewrite your entire production architecture.
This gives us a really simple but kind of devastating litmus test for any work in the backlog.
If failure of the slice would not change your roadmap, the slice is too large. If you're going to continue down that path anyway, you need to go back and find the real high-stakes risk and slice that instead. It forces an honest conversation about commitment.
Okay, we've established that slicing and estimation are strategic partners. So let's bring them together into that ideal continuous workflow that high-performing teams use.
And this workflow is a complete reversal of how most companies think. The ideal sequence is slice first, estimate later.
That makes perfect sense. Because if the slice is small and well-defined, the estimation becomes easy and reliable. You can't estimate a fuzzy 6-month epic.
But you can absolutely estimate a small 2-week vertical slice with high confidence. So great PMs, they estimate the defined slices, not the big abstract epics.
So they take the high-level goal, break it down vertically into these testable increments.
And then they ask the dev team for an estimate, but only for that first immediate risk-reducing slice.
And this is a continuous loop, not a one-time thing.
It's constant. They continuously re-slice based on the learning from the previous slice. You ship slice 1, and you learn the technical complexity is way higher than you thought, or the user response was terrible.
That new information immediately informs the scope and cost for slice 2.
And it lets the PM immediately refine the estimate for the entire rest of the project. Your estimation is always anchored in the highest fidelity information you have, validated learning, not just wishful thinking from 6 months ago. That's how you build credibility.
So when you adopt this whole workflow slice first, estimate later, what are the big benefits for the organization?
The benefits are profound. They fundamentally change how you deliver products.
Give me the top 3 outcomes.
Okay, first, you get faster feedback loops and rapid learning. Because your units of work are small vertical slices that deliver immediate value, you compress the whole discovery and delivery cycle. Instead of one big moment of truth after 6 months, you're getting meaningful, directional feedback every couple of weeks.
And that speed is the real competitive advantage.
It lets you course correct before you've sunk a ton of resources. Second, you get lower delivery risk. The team is focused on small, independent, testable chunks. The chance of a massive project failure just plummets. If one slice fails, you throw away 2 weeks of work, not 6 months of integrated mess.
And finally, the one that's often overlooked, stakeholder trust.
Yes. The third benefit is better stakeholder trust. This is so critical, especially when you're dealing with executives who want fixed dates. When a PM can go to them and say, we just completed our first slice, it confirmed our technical approach. And based on that validated learning, our estimate for the next phase has narrowed from 10 to 20 weeks down to a reliable 12 to 14. Stakeholders feel respected. They feel informed.
Because the estimates are tied to something real. They're tied to risk being resolved, not just speculation.
And that predictability builds way more trust than constantly missing arbitrary fixed deadlines.
Okay, we've laid out the ideal model. Now let's wrap up by reviewing the common traps, the anti-patterns that derail teams. We want to make sure everyone walks away knowing exactly what mistakes to avoid.
These bad habits usually come from confusing those stages of product maturity, or just prioritizing speed over learning.
Let's start with pitfall 1. Treating the MVP as a launch. This is where you see teams focusing on marketing hype, demanding perfection.
And diverting resources to polish instead of insight. The fix is to treat the MVP as an experiment. Your only focus should be on the learning results. The hypothesis you validated or invalidated, you deploy it quietly to measure behavior. You don't celebrate it with a press release.
Okay, pitfall 2. Over-slicing to meaningless work. This is the team that breaks work down so small that the increment doesn't actually deliver any value or teach them anything new. They're just doing horizontal slicing and calling it vertical.
And the fix is that litmus test we talked about. You have to ensure each slice teaches something specific. If the slice is thin but useless, as the sources say, it's just administrative overhead. Every sprint has to have a measurable learning outcome tied to a real risk.
Pitfall 3 gets back to the politics of estimation, making one-date commitments.
This just ignores all the uncertainty we talked about. It destroys the PM's leverage. The better practice is to use ranges and milestones. A PM has to be clear. We are accountable for hitting milestones that resolve risk, but we cannot commit to fixed dates based on speculation. You have to educate the organization that you can't fix scope, resources, and time all at once.
And the last one, pitfall 4, delivery-led MVPs. This is when the scope of the next slice is driven by what engineering feels they can ship quickly, not by what the product needs to learn.
The shift has to be to discovery-led increments. The scope of the next slice is determined by the highest risk assumption the PM needs to resolve, not what's easiest for engineering. The learning needs have to drive the timeline. Otherwise, you're just efficiently building the wrong thing.
That was a huge, critical discussion on the core mechanics of how high-performing product teams actually work. We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We established that estimation is really a tool for strategic risk management. It is all about insight, not accuracy. And then slicing is the tactical method we use to create those high-fidelity, testable increments that minimize our exposure to failure.
And we finally brought some clarity to that progression of product maturity. MVP is for pure learning, MLP is for emotional adoption, and MMP is for commercial viability. That hierarchy tells you what risk you're fighting and how much you should be investing.
And here's the final thought I'd want you to take back to your own teams, to your planning sessions. The true measure of a successful slice. It isn't its size, or even if it delivered a positive feature. The true measure is whether the result, especially a negative result, is provocative enough to force a meaningful directional change in your roadmap.
If the outcome doesn't challenge your core assumptions.
Then you haven't truly attacked your risk. So why did you build it?
That really brings up the whole organizational discipline around the sunk cost fallacy. It's a huge challenge. Remember that litmus test we talked about? If failure wouldn't change your roadmap, the slice is too large. Take that test and that challenge to your next planning meeting.